Distinguished guests, colleagues, and supporters of the Nuclear Energy and National Security Coalition, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. It is an honor to open this discussion on the critical nexus between nuclear energy and national security, a subject that I've been deeply involved with throughout my career. The intersection of nuclear energy and national security has never been more relevant or more urgent. In my years serving as a nuclear submariner and later as commander of U.S. Strategic Command, I witnessed firsthand how nuclear technology and its safe stewardship play a foundational role in our national defense. And today, as a co-chair of this coalition alongside former Deputy Secretary of Energy, Dan Poneman, I am very proud to work with many of you to fortify our nation's nuclear leadership in a rapidly evolving global landscape. In the current geopolitical climate, with intensifying global tensions and shifting alliances, our coalition's mission has renewed urgency. Russia's aggression in Ukraine is a stark example of how energy resources, and specifically nuclear capabilities, can be weaponized to influence and coerce. Russia's dominance in global nuclear fuel and technology markets enable it to extend its strategic reach, creating dependencies in countries that inevitably find themselves reliant on Russian energy for both stability and security. This leverage is not only an economic tool, but also a geopolitical one, offering Russia a foothold that can complicate or undermine the security of the United States and its allies. Meanwhile, China has been rapidly expanding its nuclear energy sector, heavily investing in nuclear infrastructure, both domestically and internationally. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, China is actively building and financing nuclear power plants in regions spanning from Southeast Asia to Africa and Eastern Europe. These investments are not solely economic. They represent a strategic attempt to create long-term dependencies that bind these regions more closely to Chinese influence and align them with Beijing's geopolitical objectives. The risk here is profound. If the US and its allies do not maintain a competitive presence in these markets, we may soon find that key partners and potential allies are increasingly beholden to nations that do not share our standards of safety, security, and non-proliferation. The Nuclear Energy and National Security Coalition believes that a robust US presence in the global nuclear market is not just an economic or energy priority, it is an imperative for national security. When the US leads in nuclear energy, we set the standards on critical issues like reactor safety, nuclear waste management, and non-proliferation. Our leadership has historically driven the international community toward safer and more secure nuclear practices. Losing this leadership would mean ceding influence to regimes that may not prioritize those values, increasing the global risk of nuclear accidents, lax security, or even the proliferation of nuclear materials. Furthermore, a strong US position in nuclear energy is essential for advancing our climate goals. As a reliable, low-carbon energy source, nuclear power is key to any serious effort to mitigate climate change. By exporting our technology and expertise, the US can help other nations reduce their carbon footprint while ensuring they adopt stringent safety and non-proliferation standards. In this sense, the role of nuclear energy is multidimensional. It addresses climate security, enhances energy independence, and strengthens our strategic posture by reducing our allies' reliance on adversarial nations. This moment calls for US leadership and a sustained commitment to advancing our nuclear energy capabilities and supporting allies and partners in achieving their energy and security goals. Without active U.S. engagement, we risk allowing nuclear energy supply chains and strategic influence to shift irrevocably toward Russia and China. That is why our coalition remains dedicated to advocating for policies that reinforce America's role in nuclear energy markets, ensuring we can continue to shape the standards that protect our security and that of our allies. Today, I'm very honored to introduce my co-chair, Dan Poneman, who will speak next. Dan, as many of you know, is a distinguished leader in the nuclear field and former Deputy Secretary of Energy with deep expertise in both nuclear policy and national security. He will introduce today's featured speaker, Lisa Gordan-Hagerty, the former administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration. Together, Dan and Lisa will explore how nuclear energy bolsters our national security, strengthens our foreign policy, and addresses urgent global challenges. So Dan, thank you for your leadership in co-chairing this coalition, and thank all of those participating in this webinar for joining us in this essential discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral Mies. It's an honor to co-chair this very important coalition with you, and a real both honor, privilege, and pleasure to welcome our distinguished expert and leader in her own right, which I'll come back to in a minute, Lisa Gordan-Hagerty. I'm just going to make three preliminary points here. Number one is to really pick up where Admiral Mies left off on the critical national security benefits conferred by nuclear energy on the United States. First, it is critical to our energy security. Of course, it's almost a fifth of our overall power generation, nearly half of our carbon-free power. It operates 7/24 when there are polar vortices, and coal lines and gas plants freeze. Nukes keep operating when hurricanes operate. If we are potentially attacked, we have a robust 7/24 reliable source of power. Secondly, U.S. leadership, and Admiral Mies already referred to this. Maria Korsnick likes to say that when you enter a nuclear relationship, it's a 100-year relationship, and it's true. Years of planning, years of construction, years of operation, and it becomes the cornerstone of a much broader strategic relationship. Certainly, China and Russia have treated it that way for many, many years. And we used to have the luxury of being able to take it for granted. But in this incredibly competitive environment in which those countries have really focused on nuclear as a source of geostrategic leverage, we need to, frankly, up our game to get back in the game and make sure that these relationships are not basically hijacked by our adversaries, but that we actually lean in and strengthen our geostrategic relationships with partners and allies around the world. Third, non-proliferation influence. Former Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz has a simple logic: no exports, no influence. The United States has second-to-none non-proliferation standards. There is no country, I'm very confident in saying, that has more rigorous non-proliferation conditions on nuclear commerce than we do. In fact, I don't think anyone has as robust a set of non-proliferation conditions as we do. We need to be out there. We need to make these sales and deals that are subject to the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 as amended, with all the non-proliferation protections that implies. And so we've got to be out there. We've got to be successful exporting. And then finally, and this is going to lead to our next speaker, we have an ecosystem. Again, if you look at a very well-written Energy Futures Initiative report from 2017, the ecosystem between a robust commercial nuclear industry and our national security enterprise, which does require enriched uranium for our naval reactor fuel and for the tritium that sustains our arsenal, that does require an incredibly talented workforce with highly evolved skills and safety orientation. This is a robust ecosystem in which the knowledge that there's a robust commercial industry out there will help induce more smart young people to enter the nuclear navy. And then those people will go away with the skills that they can then propagate through the commercial industry. As a former CEO, I can tell you, I loved having former Navy nuclear personnel on our team because they are just outstanding and incredible standards. And it's a reciprocal thing because then when you have a robust commercial industry, you get a supply chain that can keep the Navy supplied with the reactors we need to put on these submarines and carriers on a continuing basis. It's an incredibly efficient mechanism invented by President Eisenhower and Admiral Rickover. So that's the national security benefit. And right now, and I think everyone on this webinar knows this, we are really at a critical moment, an inflection point. We used to talk all the time about inflection points, but you couldn't have a more stark example than today of this inflection point in which finally we have a situation in which it took the tragedy of the Ukraine invasion to make people realize that the excessive dependence of the world on Russian and Chinese technology has to stop. Point one. Point two, now with this vertiginous increase in electricity demand that is being driven by AI and data centers, all of a sudden, all of us realize we really have to put our shoulder to the wheel. There's no way to fill that supply gap. Certainly no clean way to fill that gap in electricity requirements without just a lot of nuclear. That's why over 20 countries at COP28 pledged to triple nuclear capacity. You're going to see that number increase. You're seeing it increase now in the context of the Baku conference for COP29. And so we need to take advantage of this moment. You have countries throughout Europe, especially Central and Eastern Europe, trying desperately to wean themselves from their dependence on Russian energy supplies. And here I have to note that an incredible effort that was led during Lisa Gordan-Hagerty's tenure with Secretary Perry and later Secretary Biet, that led to the intergovernmental agreement between the United States and Poland, which led to the very successful and for the first time in many years, new export of large U.S. reactors, which in turn was continued in a very strong effort under Ambassador Mark Brzezinski. So this is a classic case where over multiple administrations with multiple parties, we can be, when we work together, extremely successful. And I think it's important to note the bipartisan nature of nuclear energy in this country, I think, is unparalleled in any other field. The Nuclear Fuel Security Act of 2023 passed 96-3. The Advance Act passed 88-2. I can't think of any other topic that would potentially command that kind of bipartisan support. And so those last 2 points, the points about the important role of the Department of Energy, the bipartisanship, I think really establishes a great platform for me to have the distinct pleasure of introducing someone I'm proud to call both a friend and a colleague going back many years. And Lisa, I was trying to remember if it was when you were running the NENSC team or how far back we go, but it's probably more decades than either of us would care to admit. She is extraordinarily intelligent. I'm also proud we're both from the Midwest. And she does not just talk the talk, she walks the walk. She's been incredibly effective in government. I remember when she was working in the counterterrorism field with Dick Clark and in the Bush 43 administration. She has had a distinguished business career. She came back into government in the incredibly important role as the administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration, the custodian of our nuclear arsenal. She drove a very important set of initiatives in that role with the large number of modernization projects that were consigned to her responsibility and which she carried off magnificently. We are so delighted that she's on our experts council of this coalition, and even more delighted that you took some time this morning to share with us. So Lisa, with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. And good morning, everyone from sunny Florida. I'm honored to be here today with such an impressive group of thought leaders to discuss the nexus between nuclear energy and national security. But I really do want to express my sincere thanks to the NENSC and my 2 very good friends and colleagues, Admiral Mies and former Deputy Secretary Dan Poneman, for co-hosting this event. I think the timing of the event couldn't be more perfect for this forum today. So let me start by prefacing my remarks by saying that 10 minutes that I was allotted was not much time to formulate the ideas on such significant topics. So forgive me in advance if I touch briefly on many of them that are so important to me and that have already been alluded to by both Admiral Mies and Dan Poneman. When I think about the intersection of national security and nuclear security, I ponder my last 30 plus years in government. Yes, Dan, it's been a long time. And my service in the private sector, serving both national and nuclear security spaces, learning about and dealing with bureaucracy that often made my eyes water, sometimes through tears, but most often they just allowed me to strengthen my resolve that there are better ways than government and how oftentimes the private sector can succeed in these important areas that are the foundation of our wonderful country. I met and worked with incredible patriots that knew that there was a better way than what was expected, which is why I think groups like this can break through the old thinking and pursue and succeed on this ambitious course. Because today we do stand at a pivotal moment in our nation's history, a moment filled with both challenges and opportunities as we envision the future of U.S. energy dominance and independence. And yes, the hard fact that we have often rested on our laurels, not having adequately planned nor funded what is needed for our future. The quest for energy independence is not just a matter of policy. It's a necessity for our national security, energy security, economic stability, and environmental sustainability. So I ask you all to think about that for a moment, that these very vertical ideas by their nature are now in fact and have always been intertwined. For many of you that have little exposure to the national security side of our nuclear business, or perhaps have recently joined our community, I offer you a reminder why you actually do play a critical role in this mission space and how it affects us all. Because just as our strategic deterrent that provides the foundation of our nation's security and that of our allies and partners allows us to remain free, the commercial nuclear energy sector offers many parallels. Safe and secure nuclear enterprise and strong non-proliferation programs. At the end of the Cold War, the U.S. entered a honeymoon phase, believing that our former adversary would do the same, working towards a more peaceful world. But that's not the way it turned out, as we now know. Fast forward a mere 20 plus years later, and while we were allowing our nuclear security and defense industrial complex to wither away and outsourcing what remained of critical technologies, our once single adversary continued to evolve, maintaining and building its next generation of strategic and non-strategic capabilities, while we barely maintained ours. Add to that, invading a sovereign nation not once, but twice. Moreover, the rise of a second near-peer nuclear adversary, which is now on the cusp of a fully functioning nuclear triad and pronouncing its intent that the world within the next 2 decades will become China-centric, leading the globe to a modern socialist world by 2050. That we would allow not only 1, but 2 authoritarian regimes to overcome the lone global superpower would have been unheard of. But in fact, that's now what we're facing. If we wish to uphold the norms of free and Western democratic values against authoritarian rulers such as Putin and Xi, we must focus our efforts on fundamental national security objectives. So you might wonder what these tangential thoughts have to do with commercial nuclear energy. Does anyone really believe that the 2 regimes' bellicose and belligerent behaviors and strategies don't flow into the commercial sector? For decades, the global market has heavily relied on foreign energy sources, which has left us vulnerable to geopolitical tensions and fluctuating markets. In the commercial nuclear space, we pursued and studied and studied and studied and studied yet again nuclear science and safety. We suffered numerous setbacks in the industry, whether they were self-inflicted or due to market conditions. We have allowed the nuclear fuel cycle to deteriorate to single points of failure, whether it be in conversion or enrichment. But through it all, we have achieved, as have our allies and like-minded partners, the goal of inherently safe nuclear power generation with safety, security, and non-proliferation goals at the center of our standards. Let us learn from the past and painful lessons of the defense sector. We must no longer ponder, but take action. Time is not our friend. It's time to take these models and begin to execute. And I'm not advocating setting aside the relentless pursuit of improved technologies. Rather, we have world-class leadership right here listening to this event. And by all means, we need to translate this quality and capability into action. As our speakers mentioned previously, we cannot cede our world-class positions to nations that minimize safety, security, and other standards which we operate and adhere to. Nor should we allow newcomer nations or countries that have the desire to uplift their populations from poverty by pursuing nuclear power generation and allow them to be held hostage by China and Russia that have other goals in mind. So let me pivot back to the commercial energy sector. Fortunately, we are in the midst of witnessing a transformative shift towards renewable energy, technological innovation, and a commitment to sustainability. This shift is not only beneficial, it is essential for securing our energy and national future. Further, groundbreaking partnerships are occurring that unleash the power of the private sector while facilitating cutting-edge technologies our national security community requires to maintain and advance our leadership across the globe. While the growth of solar and wind and other renewable energy sources have been remarkable and is important, we must ensure that we retain a baseload supply at all times. Nuclear power generation is that source of reliable and resilient energy supply. Additionally, we must embrace innovation in emerging technologies. Commercial nuclear power generation, as Dan alluded, provides nearly 20% of our nation's baseload energy, and the pursuit of advanced battery storage, carbon capture, and yes, even fusion technologies represent the forefront of energy innovation. These technologies offer the promise of safe, sustainable energy production. By continuing to invest in the research and development, and yes, the deployment of these systems, we can ensure the U.S. remains a leader in global energy market. Indeed, we have the greatest scientific minds applying state-of-the-art safety and security standards to all of these technologies. But circling back, we must execute at some point. Continuously studying the issue will not resolve these matters, and our adversaries are overtaking the mantle. We must unconditionally ensure that we do not allow safety, security, and non-proliferation efforts that overcome our missions, and therefore we must work through them and provide opportunities for execution. More often than not, we are our own worst enemies, and we are the ones standing in the way of making progress on the world stage. I am certain that those nations embarking on nuclear power transition or continue their growth and expansion want nothing less than safe and secure and reliable energy supply, which is what nuclear offers. It's the adversaries that are blocking or inhibiting fuel suppliers in free and fair global business, disregarding non-proliferation efforts and lowering safety standards. All of these behaviors lead down a path that we must avoid because we should learn from the past and what brought it to us. Today, we stand at a critical crossroads of our pursuit of energy independence and sustainability. As we face pressing challenges related to energy and economic resilience, it is essential we find innovative solutions that can lead to a more secure and sustainable future. Solutions such as the adoption of small modular reactors and advanced nuclear power technologies, upon which the Department of Defense, for example, and others are pursuing, and they are the correct courses of action. These transformative advancements in nuclear technology are critical to our future. These approaches will not only reduce construction costs and timelines, but also enhance safety and efficiency. Deploying these assets in areas that lack access to reliable electricity are particularly important for remote and underserved communities where traditional energy infrastructure may be lacking. By bringing clean, safe, and affordable nuclear energy to these regions, we can promote economic development and improve the quality of life for countless individuals. In addition to providing energy access, nuclear power generation enhances our national security. This not only strengthens our energy independence, but also mitigates the risks involved in geopolitical tensions and supply chain vulnerabilities. Furthermore, it drives job creation and economic growth. As we invest in these emerging technologies, we're also investing in the workforce of the future, creating high-skilled jobs in engineering, manufacturing, and operations. By fostering innovation and attracting talent to the nuclear sector, we can continue to position our nation as a leader in clean energy technologies. However, to realize the full potential of these technologies, we must prioritize regulatory reforms that support their development and deployment, streamlining the approval process and ensuring a favorable investment climate will enable us to accelerate the transition from policy to execution. But construction isn't merely enough. We can't overlook the importance of infrastructure. We must modernize our energy infrastructure by expanding our transmission networks, enhancing our energy storage capabilities, and the like. Just look at the strength and imagination. Again, the nuclear security and defense industrial complex have been, a robust infrastructure is critical to our power, our future. Again, the nuclear security and defense industrial complex are examples that we cannot allow to continue to occur in the commercial energy sector. And don't forget the power of the communities that we must engage with for local solutions that prioritize energy and sustainability. With the imagination and strength of the public-private partnerships, we can execute these missions. Just look at the incredible actions and announcements recently taken by the powerhouses of Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. They recognize it, and we can help them succeed. So I hope these few points that I've offered on the relationship between national security and commercial nuclear power sector and how they both impact the safety, security, and freedoms of the United States and that of our allies and partners around the world have given you some new insights as you pursue our common goals. So thank you for your time and attention, and I offer the floor back to our co-hosts. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lisa, am I unmuted? Good. That was incredible. And as you said, you sort of you covered so much. I want to dig down on just a couple of the points you raised, and then we also have some really good questions from our webinar participants. I took notes. We must no longer ponder but take action. My hunch is everybody on this call would agree with that. You talked a lot about the threats coming from our geostrategic rivals, Russia and China. They, in fact, just recently announced at this BRICS Plus summit a nuclear energy alliance. And Russia has signed deals with Egypt, with Turkey, with Bangladesh, and so forth. How, Lisa, do you think we can most effectively counter it? When the Russians go around the world, they offer financing, they offer the materials, they offer to take back the spent fuel, they offer to build, own, operate the reactors, they offer to mine, mill, convert, enrich. And they've been clobbering us, frankly. Their order book globally was $130 billion. And after the Westinghouse finished their 4 reactors in China, the U.S. order book was 0. And hopefully we're going to start, getting that back with Poland. But what do you think we can do collectively to basically counteract this very vigorous effort by our rivals?
Well, thank you, Dan. So I did touch on a couple of those. I want to start out by saying, again, it's wonderful to have so many people on this webinar. And I urge you, first of all, to think about reading at least the executive summary of the 2023 Strategic Posture Commission. Many people in the nuclear energy enterprise do not think about all the topics that we've been covering today, but the Strategic Posture Commission, and I was honored to be a member of the 12-panel bipartisan commission, expresses all of the issues that we touch about: energy security, sustainability, national security, or strategic deterrent, but it offers insights into how we got ourselves into the position in which we find ourselves today. Whether it was a dearth of support from Congress in terms of appropriations, the fits and starts, everything that we find ourselves now in the defense industrial complex, we're seeing throughout the globe, and for that matter, commercial nuclear power generation here in the United States, both in the front end and the back end of the nuclear fuel cycle. So I urge everyone to read the Strategic Posture Commission. It talks about the geopolitical and strategic threats, but it also gives, I think, a roadmap of recommendations on how we can strengthen our national security, and with that, our commercial nuclear security sector, our nuclear energy sector. The other thing that I want to mention is that the United States needs to hold fast on our gold standard, the 1, 2, 3 agreement. Everything that we believe is the countenance of everything we do, the background, the floor, if you will, of sustaining appropriate commercial power generation throughout the world. Like I said, neither China nor Russia think about those areas the way we do. We are the foundational support, whether it was from the dawn of the nuclear renaissance, whether it was from Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace. Everything we have done has been incredibly important to affect that foundation. So with that, let me offer one other thing, and that's the economic advice. We know we are challenged by the strongholds that China and Russia have currently in the global market. But they do something we don't do. And I think the sooner, and I believe, we're seeing it in Africa, on the African continent, about how China has gone in and basically promised free returns on critical minerals and other things. I liken that to exactly the situation where we find ourselves now, which is they will promise the world and then they hold those countries basically at hostage. We can't do that. We have to continue to be that shining force on the hill. We need to make sure that the incoming Commerce Department, Department of Energy, those that have been working to strengthen our nuclear security and, for that matter, getting out into the global markets to help facilitate nuclear power generation the United States way and that of our allies and our partners. So there's no quick answer to this. It's an all of the above strategy in terms of energy security, but everything I've read so far about the current administration, the incoming administration, seems to lend itself that we're not only going to be able to be domestically focused on, or our domestic focus on nuclear power generation for the next 20 to 30 to 50 years, but also to be able to be a real consistent supplier across the globe. We need to do things, though, to strengthen our infrastructure. Let me just say one other thing, because this is near and dear to my heart as former administrator of NNSA. We saw the fits and starts of massive projects, whether they were plutonium disposition, whether they were plutonium pit manufacturing, everything that we'd seen over the last 30 to 40 years, we're seeing now in the front end of the nuclear fuel supply. We need to take it upon ourselves to strengthen our infrastructure, because I guarantee you our adversaries are doing the same. And we need to make sure that we can go up there and we can hold the mantle and say, yes, we will be a force for good and we will be with you for the next 20 to 30 to 50 to 100 years. So it is, as Maria says, it's a 100-year strategy and a 100-year approach. And we need to be at the forefront of that. We're second to none. We need to keep that mantle. I wish I had better news on the monetary front on being able to support these kinds of issues, but we are the United States of America, and I think that brings with it a strong acknowledgement of why we are the force for good.
I want to pick up, that's great, Lisa, a lot of meat in that answer too, but I want to pick up on that very last point, because you spoke in your opening comments as well about the supply chain vulnerabilities, the single point of failure, which is unacceptable. I think all of us would agree. When I was a kid, when I started in 1975, the United States had like 90% of the global enrichment market, everything out of what we used to call the Soviet bloc. Today, Russia has 44% of the global market. China has 10% of the global market. And in terms of, and you know this better than anybody, US technology, the United States has dropped to zero. And to your point about monetary requirements and the challenges, at least we already have $3.4 billion appropriated by wide bipartisan margin. So I guess one question I would have for you in terms of addressing a critical supply chain vulnerability, not only in terms of our own manufacturing base, but also all those things you said about global influence on nonproliferation, which really, as you know better, again, than anybody, run through the whole enrichment equation. How can we take this moment and take the $3.4 billion and get a plant built?
Oh, I think that's so many of you that know me know that I'm an execution kind of person, and we need to, like I said in my comments, we need to stop studying it. We are the mainstay for nuclear security and safety. We know how to do this. We need to construct. We have nuclear-friendly communities. We know where those locations are. We just need to execute. Thank goodness the appropriations and the strong bipartisan support from Congress we've had for at least the last 10 years has been incredible. Now we need to execute. It shouldn't take us 15 to 20 years to construct a plant. These are not difficult things to do. Good Lord, we've been doing it for decades. We know how to do this. We've got state-of-the-art technology, and it's just a matter of the will and the forcefulness of the many people on this call to actually execute. It sounds trite, but somebody needs to put the first shovel in the ground and make it happen. We've got wonderful communities that will support this effort. We've got the support of Congress. We've got the support of the current and future administrations. So we need to get on with it.
I'll step out of my moderator role to say, yes, I mean, right on. I'm going to remind the registrants here, there is a Q&A button you can push. I've already started to touch on your questions. There's more than we're going to be able to get to. So I'm going to try to touch another one that came up. And again, it's something that you referenced, Lisa, which is this whole exciting area of small and advanced reactors. Talk to us, you were on the Nuclear Weapons Council, right? So you have deep DOD as well as DOE knowledge and experience, as well as private sector. There is that very exciting project Pele that was being running out of the Office of Secretary of Defense. We now have, there's been the traditional, which Rich knows very well, of the nuclear Navy, but we got the Air Force looking at small nukes. We have the Army looking at small nukes. What role can and should DOD play as a accelerant and potentially a purchaser of some of these advanced reactors to get over the hump of getting these things deployed in the kinds of numbers that you were referring to in your remarks, can show the scale benefits of scale of production that make these small modular reactors economically attractive?
Dan, so I think you hit on a very important point, the fact that there's a renaissance coming, not only in our large reactors, the gigawatt size, but these small modular reactors, and then Pele, which is an exciting project. But I want to remind everybody that the Department of Defense, part of the executive branch, is under the responsibility. Congress has to appropriate in order to do this. Congress has to authorize, Congress has to appropriate. And our appropriation cycle does not lend itself to working quickly, unlike the private sector. So we've got that challenge ahead of us. If you look back at legislation and you look back at the first parts of the Department of Defense talking about using or deploying small modular reactors, or even the Pele model, it's been almost a decade. Actually, maybe it's longer than a decade. And here we are. And it's, we've got the leadership at Idaho National Laboratory, which is basically our location where we're looking at these fuel technologies, where we were looking at these reactor technologies. But we need to execute. We are at the foundation of the nuclear safety. We know how to do it with naval reactors. We know how to do it. Look at the reactors that are running at greater than 90% efficiency, that are getting their licenses extended. We know how to do this. We need somebody to take the first step. I know the Office of Innovation, I know the Department of Defense people are doing everything they possibly can, but someone needs to begin. We had a great announcement last week, but there's nothing that says that they're going to be deploying them. Nothing says where they're going to deploy them and how fast we can move on this. I would love to see one other thing happen too, and that the interagency is a great organization that can pull things together, but everyone's vertical and everybody's stovepiped. And having spent 35 years or so in and out of government, I can tell you, with the best of them, stovepipes are fine, but somebody needs to be the belly button. And is the belly button the Nuclear Regulatory Commission? Commercial? Is it the Department of Energy that does the science and does the studying of it? Or is it the private sector? Or is it the Department of Defense that has these great ideas and concepts coming out of them? So somebody needs to take a stand on this. And I really think that perhaps the incoming administration needs to think about having a real honest to goodness place that doesn't just coordinate, but actually has a plan to execute. Because so far, I don't see a plan to execute. And I would love to see someone take responsibility for it. You know, we make decisions based on the best information we have, and we have great available information. And sure, we might have to pivot from time to time and go off course or perhaps take a course correction. However, we've got the capabilities and the strategies now. We've got the money from Congress. We've got the resources. Someone needs to do it. Someone needs to stand up and say, I'm in charge, and everyone's going to coordinate, and we're going to have an execution plan, and this is what we're going to do.
Well, again, I strongly agree. I have often said, Lisa, that we need an Eisenhower to establish a strategic vision and a Rickover to execute. And, you know, probably everybody on the webinar knows, but it is, in fact, Rickover's decision to select the light water reactor design because it could fit on a submarine that led to the whole infrastructure being built in the first place. And then when they canceled an aircraft carrier, they gave the reactors being built for that carrier to Duquesne Light Company, which led to shipping port. So that execution by Rickover led to some 90, I guess Rich would know the exact numbers, submarine reactors that are now safely operating all over the world. And it was up to 104, we're now in the low 90s. But that was all driven by that decision. And all of these many wonderful technologies being looked at today, molten salt, et cetera, were all being developed and deployed even in the 50s. But to your point, somebody has got to make that decision. And I think the new administration will have that opportunity. One other thing I want to mention that came out of your remarks, and I'm actually working through some of these registrant questions at the same time, reg reform, right? You talked about that Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We need to get our regulations in a manner that they continue to be as effective as they have been in ensuring safety, but they are not suffocating red tape that prevent deployment and prevent us, to your point, to get out of our own way, so to speak. Not compromising safety, to the contrary. I've often believed when I was at DOE, we worked to make safety regulations leaner and more effective. There was some, I think, misperception or faulty assumption that if you simply layer more and more and more rules on top of each other, that it's better and better and better, as opposed to potentially more confusing and less effective. But can you offer other thoughts about how we can move? There's been legislation that's passed that's trying to be helpful and so forth. How can we help accelerate the reform we need of our regulatory processes?
Well, so Dan, obviously you hit the nail on the head. It's, you know, it's the regulatory reform. That's really what's inhibiting a number of the execution plans, if you will, or the implementation plans. I think there's an opportunity for the NENSC, for NEI, for the private sector organizations to ensure that they impress upon Congress, impress upon the executive branch that it's time to execute, that we don't need more policies, that we don't need regulations. Again, we're the United States of America. We do things safely, securely, and effectively. Nobody's saying stop reviewing, stop considering innovative technologies for improved nuclear safety. No one's saying that at all. But we need to put together, perhaps it's a consortium, to say enough. We know how to do this. We've done this for 60 plus years, both the national security through the nuclear reactor programs, naval reactor programs. We've done this in the private sector through our 100 plus reactors, or 90 we have operating now, in the life cycle. So again, maybe, you know, maybe that's our thinking out of the box, that we do pull together more of a consortium that already exists, and let's execute, because we've got great people on the phone. We've got great people in our enterprise, both on the national security and the commercial energy side, that want to get these things done. But we can only visit Congress. We can only visit members of Congress so many times. We can only visit the Secretary of Energy so many times. And yet we still have this challenge about being able to execute, implement, put those shovels in the ground, and let's get started. Because again, our adversaries are doing just that across the world. And like you said, we have zero contracts right now. We're at the end of our 4 reactors, 0 contracts right now. We've got the Poland success, but we need to move, and we need to move for our own domestic energy independence, but for that of the world.
Well, Lisa, that all makes a lot of sense. And when I hear you talk about putting shovels in the ground and being successful and getting on with it, I can't help but think about the Navy. And, no one knows more about that than Admiral Mies. So, Rich, if I may ask, the Navy has operated for decades, for scores of years, reactors all over the world safely. I had the privilege when I was Deputy Secretary, both on carriers and submarines, to see those young kids, they looked like they were high school students, safely operating these incredible machines with lives of 144 sailors, at risk at every moment. And it's one of the great, I think, untold stories and almost a secret that all these years that we've, quote, not been building nuclear plants, we actually have been, and putting them on boats, right? So what can you tell us about how the Navy has been successful at regulating safety and at developing the workforce, which is so critical both to the deployment of these assets and then to their safe operation?
Well, thanks, Dan. Naval reactors, which is part of the Department of Energy, is a crown jewel for our nation. When I was a junior officer, we were refueling submarines roughly every 5 years. Today, we have, through naval reactors development of modern technology and advancing the technology, we have life of ship reactor cores for both our submarines and our aircraft carriers. It's a historic, phenomenal achievement in terms of how naval reactors has advanced nuclear energy technology, and one I think the commercial industry can benefit immensely from. I'd like to go back a little to Lisa's comment about infrastructure as well. Historically, over the life of this country, we built a national rail and a national highway system where goods can be transported from coast to coast, and the nationwide price of those goods is essentially equal. We have never built a national electrical grid to move electrons nationwide in a way that is comparable. And again, from an infrastructure standpoint, the ability to move electrons, electrical energy from across the coast is critically important to, again, developing a nationwide equal cost of electricity rather than having these very strong differences depending on where you live. So again, I think the focus on infrastructure that Lisa mentioned is critically important as well.
Outstanding. Thank you, Rich. I had another call from some congressional staff, question about the relationship of the private sector to the public sector. Lisa, you've been very successful in both. And the question that came in is to allow for the private sector to invest in nuclear energy production facilities, large, small, and mobile at scale. What incentives or tools can the federal government, legislative and executive branch provide to help spur investment in the private sector?
Well, that's a great question, because we're seeing the private sector invest in fusion technologies and other technologies across the board. And the incentivization there is not only a return on investment, which of course that's the foundation of our capitalistic society, which is great. And it's incredibly important. But it also, to pursue public-private partnerships, there's a model that I like to say, it's something I've been advocating for 20 or 30 years, where we're turning the government on its head, where the government has always made, government being us taxpayers, have made profound investments in the enterprise, if you will, in the infrastructure. And the private sectors come in and use the technologies, use the activities, use that foundation, done their science projects and moved on. Not unlike what we're doing at Idaho and other places, Idaho National Laboratory, which is a crown jewel of the 17 national laboratories, one of the crown jewels of the 17 national laboratories. But what I'm getting at is that there might be some opportunities here for the investments to be made by the private sector rather than the burden on the taxpayers. And the United States government then comes in and uses those systems and those technologies and that infrastructure and doing a pay-go system, which I'm a big advocate of, where they're actually paying for the use of those facilities, where the private sector is supporting them through building and maintaining the infrastructure. And everybody benefits from that. Both the burden on the taxpayer means that they no longer have to have monies being invested, and Lord knows what our budgets are these days for investments in infrastructure. But more importantly, the private sector also benefits because they are shown as being leaders in national security and energy security. So I think there are a number of different ways that we can support both the private sector for investing and also making those parallel investments. Perhaps there's a 50-50 split there between the private sector and the U.S. government sector.
Thank you. And we're coming to the end. I'm going to have I want to try to squeeze in two quick questions, one for Admiral Mies and one for Lisa. One to you, Rich, is for people in the Navy, how would you recommend specific ways that they can transition successfully into the commercial nuclear domain?
Well, I think there has always been within the commercial generation, nuclear generation community, a strong desire to recruit nuclear submariners and nuclear operators from our aircraft carriers into the commercial market. I was on the board of Exelon, now Constellation, for many years, and I was always impressed when we went to different reactor sites and you met the operators, how many of them were former nuclear propulsion operators from the Navy, all different types of ships, all different backgrounds, but they have contributed greatly to the safe and secure operation of our commercial industry. And I'm not sure there's essentially a need to change that. I think there's a strong demand already. The key issue is developing this renaissance of nuclear energy within the commercial world to expand our capabilities and keep pace. Again, nuclear provides 20% roughly of our electrical energy, and the fear I have is that without new construction, we will gradually lose that terrific baseload capability.
So Dan, I need to pile on that because one of the initiatives that we undertook at the Department of Energy and the NNSA was growing the workforce. And part of growing the workforce was the nuclear security enterprise. And we brought a number of the people from the private sector into the complex, but they also transition in and out of the commercial nuclear supply chain, if you will. So there's a number of different ways where we can promote either through through Naval Reactors Program for those that are retiring out of the Naval Reactors Program, nuclear propulsion, or throughout the enterprise of the NNSA. I'm not advocating stealing any of those great minds, but there are ways of being able to, perhaps the private sector works with the NNSA as they continue to unleash the power of going to colleges, universities, to trade schools, to bring attention to colleges and universities and trade schools about how important it is and what a great opportunity it would be to work in commercial nuclear power generation. So there are a number of different initiatives out there that I really forcefully want to extend to our people that are listening today, that they go out and look at those different types of training programs, look at the different advocacy programs out there, and jump on the bandwagon, because we've got great up and coming people and we need that next generation now.
That's great. Well, I'm going to supplement that suggestion with another one, which actually responds to one of the questions which came in What factors would enable nuclear fuel services to be bundled with nuclear reactors in international trade? Fresh fuel and used fuel take-back would be offered in exchange for abstention from acquiring fuel cycles, facilities, and infrastructure. In the short time we have, I will just note that way back in 2004, Ernie Moniz and Arnie Cantor, may he rest in peace, and John Deutsch and I wrote a proposal called the Assured Nuclear Fuel Services Initiative, which posited that countries like the United States should provide at an attractive commercial rate these services so that all the countries that actually want nuclear energy for electrons and not to build bombs can do it, and that it would be backstopped by guarantees from the International Atomic Energy Agency. I will ask the hosts here to put a link to the registrants. The article is called "Making the World Safe for Nuclear Energy." And it was a good idea then. And if we do what Lisa has recommended that we do in terms of actually building an enrichment plant, we can actually fulfill that kind of promise. So in the 1 minute we have remaining, which is not enough time, I want to just flag for Lisa this last question. We talked, all of us, about the increasing electricity demand at an incredible rate from AI centers. What are the national security implications there if we end up depending on foreign sources of energy or raw materials for the build out of the electricity infrastructure we need to support AI, and how should we prevent getting over a barrel on that one? In a minute.
Yeah, in a minute. That's almost, yeah. Stay tuned.
That's a webinar.
In all seriousness, that is something that the intelligence community, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, they're all focused on this. Commerce, exports, and imports. It's not an easy fix, and thank goodness for us, we've got the great minds at Google, Amazon, and other places that are looking into this. Countermeasures are important. I don't want to get into anything too technical, but let's just say that it's on the forefront of everyone's minds about, like I said, we've diffused our critical technologies. We are offshoring capabilities. We need to onshore a lot of those capabilities so they're domestic production. And maybe that's what we're looking at now, is there's a renaissance of domestic production so that all of the capabilities that are necessary for the supply chain are now reconstituted and basically built in America.
On that hopeful note, and with
Dan, I would just like to.
Go ahead, Rich. You get the last word.
No, I'd like to just comment again back to something Lisa mentioned. There are tremendous opportunities for commercial organizations to partner with our Department of Energy labs, many of which have strong programs in nuclear energy. Livermore has demonstrated the ability to achieve ignition several times now, world setting. Oak Ridge National Lab has tremendous uranium enrichment expertise. Lisa mentioned Idaho. Again, partnering with these Department of Energy labs offers tremendous opportunity for commercial organizations that shouldn't be ignored.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Lisa. Before I turn the gavel over to Admiral Mies for the final word, I will want to thank Lisa for an incredible set of remarks and answers. I want to thank our registrants, which came in huge numbers, showing the importance of the issue. Thank you. We did not get to all the questions. They were great questions. Obviously, there's lots of room for follow-up, and we will do that. Part of the follow-up will be by making a webinar recording available. And also, you will be receiving from the organizers a short survey, which we encourage you to complete to make sure we are being most responsive to your needs in this community. It's an incredible moment in so many ways. And for all of the dangers that we face, I think, a number of opportunities to seize. And with that, I want to, again, reiterate my thanks to Lisa and all the audience and turn the mic back over to Admiral Mies to close us out.
Well, thank you, Lisa and Dan, for your tremendous cooperation and participation. And thanks to all the participants in this webinar for your interest and support. We really appreciate that and value your contributions. Thank you again.